Welcome to the MM+M Podcast, or as we call it this week, the Cannes Lions Winner's Circle. We now know which medical marketing work took home the bronze, silver, and gold lions in the pharma, health and wellness, and Lions Health Grand Prix for Good categories. We also know who took home the Healthcare Network and Agency of the Year honors. Spoiler alert, it was the same Toronto-based firm. We have thoughts on all the results and themes emerging from Cannes, so here's how the show is going to run. First, you'll hear from editorial director Jameson Fleming, and then editor-at-large Steve Madden from On the Ground in Cannes. They've got a pair of quick hits about how medical marketing continues to grow in the broader adland environment, where there's still room for improvement in terms of boundary-pushing creative, and the business reasons for why you should absolutely be in France for the festival next year. Then I'm pleased to be joined by pharma editor Lesha Bushek, reporter Bella Jakowski, and our returning summer intern Lola Offenbach to discuss all of the honorees, including what stood out among the work and what surprised us. It's a great episode that you won't want to miss, so stay tuned.
Hey, this is Steve Madden. I'm on the ground in Cannes, and when I say I'm on the ground in Cannes, I mean I'm walking down the street in Cannes. But I just wanted to check in and get the opportunity to join in on the podcast, and I never want to miss that. So my general impression this year at Cannes is that this whole massive thing has become so much more than just an award show. You know, everybody gets excited about the Lions, but and they should, right? Because it rewards the best work in the world. But my God, it's so much more than that. I would say to anybody working in medical marketing or practically any other form of media that if you're not here, you're missing a huge opportunity. Everybody in our ecosystem, when I say our, here I mean medical marketing, pretty much everyone, every organization is here, and they're in a highly receptive mood. Last night I went to a presentation by Solomon, which is an investment bank that does both buy side and sell side, and several companies in our sector were there. And it was such a stark contrast to JP Morgan, which has this kind of crazed, $1 billion deal thing going on, and everybody runs around in suits and carries briefcases and storms through the streets of San Francisco. But in the south of France, people are more relaxed, harried, yeah, but in a more relaxed kind of harried way, and seem more receptive to conversation. I just think that, for medical marketers, everybody you want to talk to is here. And if you're on the buy or sell side of a company, there's an increasing amount of opportunity there. And I think that bodes well for the festival. I think the festival needs to be more than just awards, and it's certainly becoming that. So anyway, those are my impressions. I'm going to go have a beer. Thanks for listening.
Hello, it's Jameson Fleming, the editorial director here at MM+M, coming to you from the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity in the south of France, where it is ungodly hot and muggy, but we've had a lot of fun looking at creative and having wonderful discussions the whole week. The one thing that I really noticed was this idea that pharma is supposedly at its peak in terms of creativity. I'm paraphrasing what the jury chair said for that category, but she was very adamant that the level of entries and work in the pharma category was up this year. But the problem with that is only 7 pieces of work actually won a Lion in the pharma category. In fact, if you go into the basement of the Palais, where all the awards are held for anybody who's not been there, they actually put out on boards a lot of award-winning and shortlisted work for audiences, for all the attendees to go check out and learn from. And last year when I went to the Palais, I spent about 20 minutes going through, maybe even 30 minutes going through the work in the pharma and the health and wellness categories. They were set up in 2 long rows in the basement. This year, there's less than half the amount of work displayed for those two categories. In fact, the farmer work, there's so little displayed that it took me all of about 3 minutes to get through viewing all the work, which was really disappointing as someone who got a lot out of it last year. And anybody who was here visiting in health pharma, if you're a pharma marketer, there really wasn't much to look at. So that's kind of the biggest takeaway that I had, that, the jury is out here talking about it's a high level of work, and then there was very little work actually celebrated. So that's my big takeaway for health and wellness and pharma from Cannes here today. So for MM+M, I'm Jameson Fleming.
So you've just heard from Jameson and Madden, who are on the ground in Cannes. I am not on the ground. None of us are on the ground here. We are all scattered across the various 5 boroughs of New York, and for me in Massachusetts, coming off a World Cup match. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about Cannes and all of the big winners, and we can get into some of the creative work shortly. But I want to talk first and foremost from the agency side about Click's big showing in terms of winning both Healthcare Agency and Network of the Year. And Lesha, you and I have been working together for 4 years now, and Click has been a constant in our life. What was that like to see them take home, these kind of, I'll say it, long-awaited honors from every time that I've talked with them? That's been something that's been on their radar, and to get both in the same night was definitely something special.
Yeah, it's definitely a big moment for them. They've been at the top of our agency 100 list for many years. I actually have never had the chance to interview them for Agency 100, but I know, Jack, you have, and I think Jameson did this year. I don't remember who did it this year, but, hearing that they won big at Cannes this year is definitely exciting to hear, and I'm very happy for them. I know that they were thrilled and they seemed very excited about it. So great news all around.
Yeah, it was one of those things that, you hear things through the grapevine, and I know that Madden had messaged me and he's like, I think there might be something coming through. And then to see them win not one, but both, certainly a testament to the work that they've done. And Bella, I want to bring you in here because you've covered them, even in your short time here, you've become pretty familiar with Click and all the work that they've done. You just recently covered them too. What was the campaign that you did? Was that the concussion one or?
Yeah, they worked on a spinoff. It's a video game modification, a spinoff of Madden. The players sort of have or exhibit concussion symptoms, which is really interesting and sort of meant to, meet a lot of the players where they're at. A lot of these high school, college players playing this game, just having concussion be top of mind. So yeah, a lot of really creative stuff coming out of Click recently. I have a friend there. She was very excited to hear the news yesterday. She said, I'm updating my email signature right away with this news. So yeah, it seems very well deserved.
And last but not least, this is somebody that's our audience should be familiar with on the podcast. Lola, our summer intern, returning for round 2. First off, welcome back. You've been here for about a week or so we're glad to have you back for the summer run here. But you also went to one of Click's more recent activations just today in Times Square. You want to tell the folks all about that?
Yeah, it was partnered with CSC using the famous 80s Jenny's number to create a cancer hotline, and the people I spoke to there were really excited about the activation, about the wins in France, and all around they're just having a really positive experience right now.
I'm glad that you said the famous 80s song, because we had a little debate in our call earlier today about whether 8675309 is famous to all generations or just certain generations. We won't debate that here for the sake of you, the listener, but we will get into some of the other creative work here. We had the Pharma Lions that went out, the health and wellness ones, and then the Lions Health for Good with the United Nations Foundation. Bella, I want to throw it over to you first, just in terms of like all of the work that we saw out there. I don't know if there were any of the gold winners that stuck out to you or the Grand Prix, but there was definitely some interesting work, as Jameson talked about. It was really good to see this kind of mix come to the forefront in terms of what was getting honored.
Yeah, so a big winner was the Novartis Relax Your Tight End campaign, which played during the Super Bowl this year. And we were lucky enough, Jack and I got to sit down with Delaney Walker, who was one of the players featured in the campaign. And I think it sort of really well captures what I heard in some of my conversations leading up to Cannes about what to expect. And one of the things like I heard from jurors, past presidents, is just that humor is a great place to be, but it's also are great. Humor is a great thing to achieve in these campaigns, but it's hard for pharma to do because, you run, at worst, like into regulatory trouble and, sort of, even if you're not there, you might run into some sort of like sensitive areas and like things that, no one's joking around about oncology drugs normally, for example. But this particular campaign we heard had a lot of positive feedback when it aired. And it was around, relax your tight end, like relax, it's not, prostate cancer screening doesn't have to be this big, scary, invasive thing. And so I was not surprised to see that do really well this year, just given the reception it had before the festival.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken there. And Lesha, I'd love to hear from you too. Like I always hear when we're talking to creatives, like, oh yeah, like you can use humor or pharma should try and be, I won't say funny, but funnier. But then there's always the risk of like, you don't want to be making fun of the patient or the condition or anything like that. But I think this was a really good example. And obviously the jurors agreed of being able to thread that needle in a really effective way.
Yeah, I mean, we covered this when it launched during the Super Bowl, and I've talked to Gil Horde because they had sort of an activation around this campaign at ASCO as well. So they've had kind of a big year around it. But I do think they towed that line really well because, as Bella mentioned, it's hard to like do something funny about cancer, but they managed to tow it like the right balance by making it lighthearted enough so that people can be open to the idea of, discussing prostate cancer screening with their doctors. We know that men have historically not been as open about health issues in the past. So I think they really played it well with this one. I'll also call out the humor in another one of the winners, Gilead Sciences, Canada's animal attraction for the HIV prevention drug Descovy, won a bronze. And they kind of, I saw the artwork for the campaign. It was cute. They used like bears and otters and wolves and different animals that are commonly used to describe different body types within the LGBTQ plus community. And I thought it was kind of relevant too because it's June Pride Month. And I thought they did a good job with kind of like blending humor for that one as well. So I wanted to call that one out.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that too. I think when you see what Gilead and Vive, and we just had them on the podcast a couple weeks ago, what they're able to do in terms of talking about really sensitive health topics and really community focused stuff, but being able to do it in a way that's relatable. If you're familiar with the term otters or bears or something like that, and you see that represented in your marketing, I have to imagine that resonates with you differently than say if it's just like, oh yeah, here's an HIV drug and it's treated like it would be for any other sort of disease state or condition. One thing too that I really enjoyed, just going back to the oncology thing for a second, was the Fuck Cancer had one that we included in our newsletter a few months ago, the Beat Off Cancer, where it was basically encouraging men to, for lack of a better term, masturbate more because it stimulates the prostate, and that's been shown to reduce the risk of prostate cancer later on. I thought that was a very not safe for work approach to being able, but again, something that's very funny. It's focused on cancer, and it seemed to really resonate there again with a patient population like you talk about, Lesha, that's not the most open in terms of talking about their health conditions or certainly their feelings around that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I think there's something to be said. I think the last few years we've seen a push in pharma to be a little more creative, a little more edgy, a little more humorous, and we're starting to see that play out really well, I think. But the other interesting thing that maybe we can talk about later is, I listened to Jameson's dispatch, and one of the things he mentioned is that he was actually surprised there were fewer entries in pharma this year or winners in pharma this year than last year. And he was a bit disappointed to see that because we kind of assumed pharma was going to be a growing category this year. But from the small amount of work that did win, I think we are seeing that creative be elevated in the ways that pharma marketers have been trying or aiming to do in recent years, I would say.
Definitely. And we can circle back to that. We'll put a pin in that to circle back a little bit later. Lola, I want to bring you back in because in addition to having the pharma lines out there, there was also the health and wellness lines, which are similar. It's obviously not the same thing. It's a little bit less restrictive. Was there anything in terms of the winners that you saw that really stuck out to you in terms of hey, this is a trend line that really was working, or one particular campaign?
Well, it's funny. The Fuck Cancer's Beat Cancer Off was one of my favorites in the health and wellness category, and I sent it to my boyfriend today too, and we were talking about it. So it's definitely the humor is a good conversation starter, I really liked Kotex's. They won a gold and a bronze, and they had 2 different ad campaigns. So the Arts Missing Period one was like documentary style, and I really enjoyed that. I felt like it was almost a little bit different from what you see, because a lot of companies are doing like these shorter ads to capture audience attention. So I think seeing that go in a different direction and be like very well researched, like talking to journalists and things, was really insightful to see like the history. And it was less about their product and more about the meaning behind the products that they have. And then obviously the Grand Prix winner, the Ordinaries ad, was like really jarring to me to watch the video. Like it just made me very uncomfortable. Like just the different textures and like the way people were like touching and pulling at their skin. So I think it did a really good job of like juxtaposing the periodic table of elements with the like non-scientific backed like marketing words that are thrown around all the time.
I'm glad you bring up that point too, because that's something that obviously, you know, I think back to when we had put Lesh on the social media beat and stuff, and it's like you just hear these things all the time. And I think like looks maxing now is probably the one that gets the most play, but there's all these sorts of terms and stuff that get thrown around out there. And I do give them a lot of credit for, to your point, it might be very unsettling or disturbing to be able to look at that sort of stuff, but it's honing in on it almost like a heat-seeking missile in a way, to be like, we're focused on you, the consumer, and making sure that you get the best experience and you're not wasting your money or your body or any of that sort of stuff. So I'm glad you called attention to that, because that was one that when I saw it was up on one of the short lists, I was like, there's probably a chance. And obviously the jurors agreed. Bella, I'm curious if you had any thoughts on them coming through the Grand Prix.
I mean, I was telling Lola in the office yesterday, I just love The Ordinary as a brand, and I've used it for a lot of years. And I think that they've been doing they've just had really nailed branding for a number of years. So I'm not surprised to see that, you know, they took home this big one.
I want to go back to what Lesha was bringing up earlier in terms of the actual entries, because at the start of the week, Arthur Sedone from Publicis had talked about that the entries were down. I think the overall entries at Cannes were down about 25%. And his argument was, well, this is actually going to be better in terms of the work that gets honored. And I think there could be an argument there. Obviously, the work that we've seen, and you can go to the website to look at that, probably can attest to that. But there's also, to Jameson's point, and he has the wider berth to look at it because he's the editorial director of campaign as well, that there is a lacking. And I'm curious, Lesha, maybe just if you want to kick off the conversation there, just what you make of that. Like, it shouldn't necessarily be quantity over quality, but I also don't think that we should be subtracting one in favor of the other necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know what has led to pharma not having as big of a winning presence this year. Like, maybe Jameson has more of an answer to that after kind of listening to what's happening on the ground. But I did think it was interesting that overall the entries were down about 25%. Because I know that they tightened criteria this year, kind of following the controversy last year where there was footage that was doctored using AI and like a fake news report. I don't know the details of that, but I know I remember that made a big splash last year. So from my understanding, they decided to kind of like respond to that by tightening the rules a little bit and the criteria. And so one can argue that like the winning entries this year might have higher standards that they won against. Maybe that's like proves that the creative is getting better on the pharma side. But, you know, I can't really speak to why pharma has had less of a winning presence this year. But I do think the quality is up, even if the quantity is down.
Definitely. And I wonder one thing too, and Bella, I'll throw it over to you for this one. It's just like, I did notice just going through even some of the work that was down in the silver and bronze winners, not a lot of AI stuff. Like maybe it was earlier on in the process in terms of ideation stuff, but when you look at execution, it did seem very like human centric and everything. And I wonder if too, there was that fear of what happened last year, or maybe just a recognition of this kind of brewing AI hesitancy or backlash among consumers to be like, maybe we don't include that in our work. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a really strong theme in the pre-Cannes preview I did, speaking with some agency leaders. You know, I think you're probably right in that like AI was involved in the workflow at some point in all of these projects. But I also think, you know, people were really fearful, sort of just in looking at you know, who was up for these awards and eventually who would win, that there wouldn't be that sort of, I feel like I'm saying this all the time now, but in this cliche, but human in the loop vibe. Like you'd increasingly feel like these campaigns, these assets, whatever, are losing that human touch, whether that's relatability of like an influencer or a patient or whoever it might be, or just in like the nitty gritty creative itself. And I think that if I'm, and I will catch up with all of those folks that I talked to for the preview after the fact, like, I think we can pretty safely agree that didn't come across, that fear wasn't, realized in the work this year.
No, I think that's a well taken point. And Lola, I'm curious your thoughts too, as the most junior member of our team. And like, obviously, your schooling has been impacted by the AI-ification of it all. It's like, do you have any sort of feel in terms of like when you see either AI content or even AI advertising? I think we've all started to see that seep into our various social media feeds in some way or another. Like, does that draw something out of you in a certain way, like good or bad? Is somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, I was at a very pro AI college, Raven University. We experimented with Boodlebox. I was like one of the first students to use it. So like on the back end, like I've utilized it a lot, and honestly, I hate it. Like, I don't enjoy it. I might be in the minority of my generation, but I think just like even here last summer and like the couple weeks I've been here, I've been reading a lot about like consumers just wanting more honesty in marketing and like wanting like that human approach, like Bella said. And like, I think the biggest thing is they just want brands to be honest with them. They don't want all the marketing like BS that PR and marketing agencies tend to push. And so I think it just feels disingenuous when you have like AI created content being thrown at you left, right, and center. So seeing these like human approaches, I think really ground and center each campaign and each like video that we've seen.
And people want to see you show off too. Like that was something that I heard with the people I was doing my previews for Cannes for. And I know it's the same thing for you, Bella. It's like this focus on craft and being able to say like, yeah, make it look good. Make it look like something that you would actually be proud of and putting out into the world was really an emphasis. And I do think a lot of the stuff that we saw get rewarded was pretty much in line with that too.
Also, not for anything, but I feel like a lot of talking to like folks for A100 profiles and stuff, like a lot of the AI utility was in what people were describing as failing faster. So rooting out bad ideas, rooting out things that didn't work, from like an MLR perspective or just from like a brand perspective, what people are looking for, being able to put proofs in front of brands and clients faster. And then, I have to believe that leads to, or that contributes to getting higher quality, more aligned work out. Not just faster, but just, I don't know, those good ideas floating to the top more efficiently.
Definitely. I want to pivot off to just kind of being able to wrap this up a little bit. We've talked about the pharma Lions. We talked about the health and wellness ones, and obviously Click coming home with the agency honors. One that really stuck out to me too, because there is so much work. Like a lot of these campaigns are stuff that we've covered. We covered the Novartis Super Bowl launch, and there's a bunch of other ones that you can see in the winners circle that we also had a hand in covering when they were launched, or after they've been rolled out into the world. But one that really stuck out to me was the one for the Lions Health Grand Prix for Good, and that was Carita Sweden's work on the repurposing of the Pope Mobile as a mobile health clinic. And I'd be curious just to hear from all of you. Maybe Lesha, you can start off. Like, it's again just one. I think some of the most effective campaigns, efforts, initiatives that we cover are just like, what if we just do a simple thing? Lola, you were at the thing today where it's like, what if we take this phone number, turn into a cancer lifeline? Being able to say, let's take this very famous vehicle and repurpose it for this health focus to bring attention to an ongoing humanitarian crisis. It really stuck out to me. I was very happy to see that picked, but I'm curious, Lesha, what you make of it.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to highlight that one as well because it was really impactful. It was Pope Francis's final wish before he died to have his Pope Mobile be transformed into a medical clinic for children in Gaza. And I think that they did a really good job. It was because they kind of like turned his seat that he sat in it into like the chair that the children would sit in, to receive care. And I thought that very simple, subtle detail was like very impactful. So I'm glad to see them win. I think it really stands out too because it kind of like brings humanitarian aid to the forefront. And like, that is a big aspect of health. You know, maybe in the US, we kind of forget that. And we see a lot of campaigns focusing on like US based health issues. But, you know, I think it really draws attention to a humanitarian crisis that is still ongoing. And I think they said, you know, they haven't allowed any other mobile units to come in. So it's definitely something that's still going on. So I'm glad to see that highlighted.
Yeah, the thing here is they estimate that the clinic could treat as many as 200 children in a day, but as with so many other medical health vehicles, have not been allowed permission to enter Gaza, which is the ultimate cruelty and unfortunate nature of this situation. I think your point's well taken there too, Lesha, because I remember when I joined in April of 22, that was only a couple months after the Russian invasion of Ukraine had started. And it was the same focus on like the bombardment and destruction of hospitals in eastern Ukraine and the health impact that comes with the humanitarian crisis. You just think about it from a war perspective, but it's like, no, people still have healthcare that they need to have access to that they no longer do, vaccines, all that sort of stuff. And so that's what really, yeah, I can't stop. I've looked at the work so many times since they won just over the past day or two, and it still is just so resonant. Bella or Lola, I'm curious if you had any sort of reaction to it as well.
I'm glad you brought that one up because I like wrote down about that. I really thought like that one deserved the Grand Prix even. It just like, I think it was like just like such a good cultural moment. It caught so many themes in our society at like the perfect time. Obviously like there's a new pope now. He's from the US. Having that there, sending life-saving care into a war zone is obviously like something very necessary right now. But even with like the midterm elections, voters in the US are even dealing with access to healthcare. So I think it kind of puts into perspective how global healthcare access is and like the struggles to get access to healthcare right now. So I think that I was choking up watching the ad, and I really think it was a good advertisement, a good campaign, and I feel like they just like caught lightning in a bottle with it almost.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and there are a few moments I think over my recent memory where, you know, the Catholic faith has had a lot of good PR moments, and I think, you know, has become increasingly ensnared in U.S. politics, and you know, as it relates to humanitarian aid and otherwise. And I just think that I have to believe that there are a lot of other people who are raised Catholic or who are Catholic who were really proud to just have, you know, their faith on stage at Cannes. And I, you know, it's unfortunate that the vehicle hasn't been allowed in. And I have to think also that, you know, there's a chance that the increased attention brought as a result of this reward will keep applying pressure there. And, you know, hopefully the effects of such a project aren't finished yet.
No, I think that's entirely well said, and I appreciate you being able to localize it in that way. And one other thing that just stood out to me too is just because I think it shows the range of this award is like last year it went to the best place in the world to have herpes for the New Zealand Herpes Foundation. So you see kind of the range where it's like something that's a little bit more humorous and kind of, you know, having a poke and a laugh with it, to this. The year before that, it was child wedding cards, and it focused on Pakistani girls creating invitations to fictional child weddings. The year before that was Publicis with working with cancer. So like it's very much in that tradition of like, let's take a simple concept and bring a much greater degree of attention to something that needs that focus. And certainly they did that with the work. And it almost feels weird to even call it an ad because it goes so far beyond that. The concentric rings just keep expanding. So it's certainly well deserved there. Again, to kind of summarize it all for the folks that are listening, is just, it does feel like the work really stepped up this year, even if there wasn't the amount. Well, I think that's where we're going to put in a pin for Cannes. It's obviously not the end of the Cannes coverage. You'll get plenty of stuff after this podcast drops tomorrow and throughout the next couple of weeks as Matt and Jameson come back and detox from the rosé and put aloe on their skin for the sunburns and everything. But we'll have plenty more coverage. So keep an eye out there on the website, mmm-online.com, and look forward to next week's episode where Bella brings us a conversation with Noom CEO Jeff Cook, which is all about their their place in the GLP-1 world and their ongoing advertisements with Rebel Wilson. He's got some fun insights there. So we will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in for our special Can episode, and we will see you then. Take care. The MM+M Podcast is produced by our editorial staff, Bella Jakowski, Lesha Bushek, Steve Madden, Jameson Fleming, and Jack O'Brien, with production and editing by Bill Fitzpatrick and Gordon Thaler. Listen to all episodes at mmm-online.com or wherever you get your podcasts.